right. Thank you all for joining us today. Most of you probably know me by now. My name's Amanda. I'm with Generation Schools Network. I'm one of our senior career implementation specialists. And today our guest speaker is Ms. Katrina, who is the Director of Nursing Education Programs at Ames in Greeley. And we are super excited to hear her talk about the health and sciences of becoming a nurse. And I will turn it over to you, Katrina. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Good morning, everyone, or I guess it's still morning. Anyway, hopefully this is exciting. I don't know. I'm not sure how exciting I can make this, but I can talk to you about nursing and hopefully answer any questions that you have. And I will just start in with that. I'll start kind of with my path, which I don't know if that's a normal path. What I will tell you is that I was a CNA, a certified nursing assistant in long-term care for about 8 years. The whole time I was in high school and then all through college. And I think that's actually what got me excited to maybe become a nurse and that type of thing. So I went to college and got my bachelor's of science, which is just one of many different paths you can take to get your RN. Mine was a little bit unique in the fact that the Army actually paid for me to go to school. So I went into the military right after college as a brand new nurse, and I think I was like everybody that goes in the military. I was thinking, of course, that I was going to be a trauma nurse, that I was going to be taking care of soldiers that had been shot or hurt in the line of duty. And that's how I ended up in Colorado. I was stationed at Fort Carson down in Colorado Springs. And my first nursing job was as a labor and delivery nurse. And when they told me that, I was like, what? Like, no, I didn't join the military to deliver babies and do all that. And I was really, in the very beginning, I was like, what? This is not why I joined the military. Anyway, I ended up loving it. And that's what I did for the rest of my career until I became an educator, as I delivered babies and loved it and would never have probably changed that for the world. The other thing that I would say is a little bit probably different for me is that I didn't ever expect to go back to school for anything other than my bachelor's, right? When I was 18, 19, 20 years old in college, I thought, this is it for me. I'm going to be a nurse for the rest of my life. I'm going to love it. And then at some point, I don't know, I just decided I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I thought I could make a difference teaching nursing students and that kind of thing. So I went back and got my master's degree, and that's ultimately how I became a teacher. At the point that I was in my master's, I thought, never again. I'm never, ever, ever going back to school, but be careful what you wish for, because then I ended up going back for my PhD. Someone told me at some point that I couldn't keep teaching long-term without a PhD, which is probably not really very true. But anyway, I ended up going back to get my doctorate, and that's how I ended up in the role that I'm in today. So I think a lot of people, when they're starting to think even about healthcare, they're trying to think about what they want to do long-term and that kind of thing. And so I think this graphic really spells it out really well. In nursing, there are so many paths to take that it's really hard to decide what is the right one for you, or if there is a right one for you. But the good thing about nursing is that it's so easy to find a path that works for you, depending on how much school you want to have and that type of thing. So I just put kind of the various paths on there. The top 3 are by far the most common ones. I would say the LPN program, the licensed practical nurse, is a 1-year nursing program. We have a ton of LPNs in the state of Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, and that type of thing. And they've just decided that they want to either work in a clinic environment, or a lot of them have children and don't want to go to school for a long time. And so they choose that 1-year path, the licensed practical nurse. We also have the RN path, which is a 2-year program. And that just happens to be the program that I direct at Ames Community College. And with the RN, with the RN degree, which is an Associate of Applied Science, they can sit for the National Licensure Exam and become an RN. And again, some people choose that path and can stay in that for the rest of their nursing careers. They can work in acute care. We'll talk about some of those things a little bit later. The third one is the Bachelor's of Science, the BSN, the Bachelor of Science in Nursing, which a lot of people take right out of high school. That is a 4-year degree, similar to what you could get like at the University of Northern Colorado or CSU, that kind of thing. And so students come out with their Bachelor of Science in Nursing. It's very similar, I will say, though, to the RN degree, the 2-year degree, in the fact that an RN is an RN is an RN. Whether they have a bachelor's or an associate of applied science, they can work in acute care and hospitals and clinics and that type of thing with both the associate of applied science and the bachelor's. And then I added some of our more advanced degrees, the Master of Science in Nursing, which is, like I said, what I just happen to have. I have a education master's, but there are family nurse practitioners can get their master's degree, nurse leadership, nursing informatics. There are so many master's options available in nursing. It just depends on kind of what you want to do with it. And then finally, the doctorate or the PhD. Oops, did I do that? Sorry. The doctorate or the doctorate of nursing practice. Again, that's a nurse practitioner degree. You can get an educational doctorate. Again, those are considered the terminal degrees in the nursing education pathway. I always joke and say they're called the terminal degrees because it halfway kills you to get through them, but not to detract from the idea that you want to go to school for a doctorate. Okay, so characteristics of nursing. This is something that I thought is just really important because I think people sometimes don't really know what nurses do and how much responsibility they have. So I just put some of these characteristics up there. I think some of them are things that you'll know right off the top of your head. I mean, for the most part, I would want a nurse that's caring and really is interested in taking care of people. Having someone that's open-minded, because I will tell you, you are going to meet every type of person from every walk of life, whether it's their ethnicity, their religious background, their cultural upbringing, their sexual orientation. And in nursing, our job is to take care of them wherever they are in their lives and do the very best that we can for them and their family. So open-minded, I think, is really important. Adaptable, detail-oriented. That's my little gecko up there in the left-hand side. I feel like that's what nurses do every shift. They come on and they're green when they start and they're pink by the time they get done. Is that, you know, some days you start out thinking you're going to have the greatest day of work ever, and then you get 3 admissions and 2 discharges, and then someone codes and you have to do CPR, and it just doesn't quite go the way you expect it to. And so you have to be adaptable. One of the other things that I know, when you're in high school, you don't really want to think about this idea, but being a nurse means that you become a lifelong learner. I will tell you, I am old. You probably can tell that from looking at me, but I've been in nursing for almost 30 years, and I learn every single day. And when I was at the bedside, I learned every single day at the bedside too. It's just, there's so much to learn and things are always changing. And so I think having that mindset that you're always going to learn. And I know when you get out of high school, and especially when I got out of college, I'm like, I don't ever want to pick up another book and learn another thing. But that's not really the reality of being a nurse. Being resilient, I think, is super important, especially on bad days, for sure. I have been with a lot of patients and a lot of families watching their loved one die, and that's obviously a very tough thing that a lot of people don't have to deal with on a daily basis. I would say in labor and delivery, that was by far the hardest for me. In labor and delivery, when you're having a great day, you are having a great day. But when you aren't and a baby dies, like, I will probably never forget the babies that I've taken care of that have passed away. So just being resilient. And then I think having a sense of humor. And I would say most nurses have a really wacky sense of humor. Sometimes a little dark. We joke about bad things just to make ourselves feel better about them. But I think having a sense of humor helps you get through for sure. Okay. So then the specialties, and this is what I think is so fantastic about nursing, is once you get your nursing degree, you can do so many things with it, so many things that people aren't even aware of. And so I just say, whatever you want to do, you can do it. You can go out there and find a job that works just for you and what you want and what you're looking for. I think when people think of acute care, and that's what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about, that's in the hospital, right? And that's probably where 80% of all of my new graduates go, is they go right into the hospital. But even in the hospital, there are just so many opportunities and cool things to do. You can go into long-term care and take care of geriatric patients. You can work in outpatient clinics. You can do community health out in the field of nursing and never actually step foot in a hospital from the day you graduate. And then, of course, there's all of our advanced degrees, which some of them are so exciting. Nurse practitioners, which really work just under the direct supervision or side supervision, I guess I would say, of a physician and take care of patients in the clinic. Nurse anesthesiologists or anesthetists, and then nurse midwives who deliver babies. So I'm going to focus more on the specialties within the hospital, because I think they're the ones that most people think of when they think of nursing. Medical surgical nurses is one of our first specialties that I think our graduates see and work in right out of graduation. It kind of forms the backbone of all the information and skills that they have to know to do any other type of nursing. They take care of acute post-op patients that have just had their gallbladder out or had their appendix out, that kind of thing. They also care for a lot of patients with chronic diseases. If you know anything about our population in the United States, unfortunately, for as much money and access to healthcare that we have in our country, we are not necessarily a healthy population. So medical surgical nurses take care of people with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, with patients that have coronary heart disease that are suffering from largely their genetics and a lot of choices that they've made in their life. So taking care of quite a few sick people. But like I said, this role is probably some of the best preparation that you have for all of the other roles in nursing or choices that you have. Another one, and I just put this picture, I don't need to put anything else up there because I think this is the coolest part of being a labor and delivery nurse, is just the idea that you take care of the mom and her family while she's delivering her baby. And like I said, this is what I did for 20 some years, 22 years. And by far, one of my favorite things in the whole world to do. A lot of times, if you're labor and delivery, you also go to the postpartum unit. So you take care of the mom and the baby during kind of a really, really fantastic point in their life after they've had a baby and they're getting ready to go home and try and figure out what to do with that baby once they take it home, I guess. And then intensive care is another one. ICU nurses, I have, I think, 4 of them that work for me. Great nurses. Almost always you don't become an ICU nurse from the minute you step in as a new graduate. And if you look at kind of the picture of this patient, that is exactly what being an ICU nurse is. A lot of times the patient isn't breathing on their own, so they've got a tube down their throat, keeping them alive and keeping them breathing. And then they have, I don't know how many that patient has, probably six IV lines with different medications that are keeping their blood pressure up. But in this setting, you're absolutely taking care of patients that are in critical condition. Either they've had a life-altering accident of some kind, they've had a heart attack, or they've had a stroke, that kind of thing. But in this environment, it takes so much rapid critical thinking to keep patients alive. Most of the time when you're in the ICU, the nurses literally sit right at the door of the patient's room. They don't ever go to the nurse's station. They sit there for 12 hours and intervene when they need to, and then just watch the patient and make sure that they're doing okay. This is probably also the area of the hospital where you do the most advanced life support. So doing CPR, doing rapid response teams that are really swooping in very quickly to save the patient's life if they have a heart attack, if they're having a stroke, if something else is really horrible is happening to them. And ICU nurses will joke a lot, at least mine will, that you don't really talk a lot to the patient, right? If they're unconscious or if they're intubated and they've got a breathing tube down, they don't talk to you much. But I will tell you, one of the huge roles that ICU nurses play is family support and communication, right? It's really hard to watch a family member die or to go through this process and worry about them dying, even if they get to be sent home 2-3 weeks later. So these nurses spend a lot of time giving emotional support, communicating with family, helping them understand, why does my dad look like this? Why does he have all those tubes? Why are they all necessary? And that kind of thing. So that's the intensive care unit. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is the operating room. This is probably the one area of nursing where you spend the least amount of time talking to patients because they are generally unconscious most of the time you're there. So this is a very unique role within nursing. And a lot of people go into the operating room and work there their entire lives. They love it. They love working with the surgeons, the anesthesiologists, and the nurse anesthetists. And yeah, just a very different type of role. The operating room is really fast paced. Patients come in, you maybe go through 5, 6, 7, 8 surgeries a day. It's absolutely nuts. And again, I like to talk to people, so I would have a hard time being an OR nurse, but that's okay. So a couple other things I just wanted to share with you before you can ask any questions that you have is the other big thing in nursing is for nurses to get advanced certifications. And I just put some of them on here. These are some of the certifications that nursing uses just to increase the expert status of nurses. If a nurse has been a nurse, say a trauma nurse for 10 years, she can go back and take the trauma nursing core course and become a TNCC nurse. So again, this is what I was talking about before, is that it's part of the lifelong learning. For example, a lot of emergency room nurses will take the PALS course, Pediatric Advanced Life Support, so that it demonstrates when a pediatric patient, say a 4-year-old comes in and they're unconscious or not breathing, that nurse knows that they are expertly qualified to start that child's heart again and assist the physician in that kind of advanced life support issue. I put another one on here. This poor guy in the left-hand corner obviously had some significant burns, but nurses can go back and get their advanced burn life support. And one of my full-time faculty is an ABLS certified nurse, and she worked at the burn center at NCMC when it was open for, I think, 10 years. And again, a really interesting part of nursing, not something that I'm interested in because I think it's a really tough part of nursing to be in, but she's just a fantastic burn nurse and went back and got her ABLS certification. So again, for the most part, it's just the idea of continuing to learn and increasing the professionalism of nursing and demonstrating that we are the experts in that one potential specialty area. So then the last one that I wanted to talk to you about, if you know anything about nursing in Colorado, I guess in the United States, it's a pretty competitive field to get into. There are not enough spots in the hospitals for our students to do clinicals. There's not enough seats at the universities or at community colleges to bring in all the nursing students we want to. So if you're thinking about it, I just thought I would kind of end with this is just kind of the things that you have to think about. One of them is the emphasis on sciences. If you don't like science, if you hate science, nursing may not be for you. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, I would say there's a difference though between biology and chemistry. I loved biologies, I loved anatomy, I loved all the body things, but I didn't like chemistry. And honestly, if you're just like that, you can be a nurse because I just did not like chemistry. Sorry if any of your chemistry teachers out there, but anyway, you can be a nurse without having extensive chemistry background and that type of thing. The other big thing we look at is grade point average. And I think, again, when I meet with prospective students, that's one of the things I emphasize for them all the time is when you go to school, don't jump in and feel like you have to take a full-time load your first semester, because sometimes it's more important that you back off and take just maybe one last class, but actually do super well at the classes that you're in. So your GPA stays pretty competitive from the time that you do. And the other thing that I always think is if you're not a CNA yet and you're thinking about being a nurse, get a CNA job, become a certified nursing assistant, because it gives you a sense of what you're getting yourself into as a nurse. And I think that's really important because I've had students, back when I worked at the University of Northern Colorado, we had, I bet 5 students in the time that I was there that finished their nursing degree and decided that they didn't really like people. And that's going to be a tough career path for you. Or they didn't like touching people, or they didn't like when people threw up on them. And I hate to say it, but they're going to. If you don't like blood, it's not the job for you. So I think having that CNA experience is really, really good because it opens your eyes to what you're potentially getting yourself into. So, yeah. And that is really it for me. So there's my contact information. And yeah, if you have any questions, I can definitely answer them for you.
Yeah, feel free to type any questions in the chat or unmute yourselves.
Sounds.
Maybe we don't have any. Sometimes they don't. That's okay.
Yep.
Fine.
Okay, well, my contact information is up there too. So if you have questions, things that you don't want to ask in front of a group, go ahead and feel free to email me and hopefully I can answer for them. But if you're thinking about it or you're not even sure what you want to do, think about nursing. I have been a nurse for a long time. Oh, okay. How to get your CNA while still in high school? Great question. So there are a few different ways to get your CNA. Almost all of the community colleges in the state will have a CNA program. There are also quite a few different area organizations that have CNA courses or will know where to get one. So in Greeley, we have KHAC, but most towns have part of that educational component in their community. So that's another great resource. The other one that is just huge is a lot of the long-term care facilities. So nursing homes will actually have their own CNA program. They actually bring in their employees and train them with the CNA certification, and then they pay for it. So that's huge. So yeah, I would say, again, depending on where you live, there's always, I don't know any towns in Colorado that don't have at least one nursing home and that kind of thing. If it's a really small town, you may have to go a few miles to the town next door, but there are a lot of long-term care facilities in the state that will assist you to get your CNA so you don't have to pay for it. And then they will, then they'll let you work for them as a CNA. How expensive are the courses? Are you talking about CNA courses or nursing courses? Both. Okay. So the CNA program, I would say the average CNA program does cost between $600 and $1,000, which is why I always say get someone else to pay for it. So if you can get a long-term care facility to pay for it, they will, they'll either pay for it outright, or a lot of them will have a deal that if you agree to work with them for 6 months to a year afterwards, they will reimburse you for the cost of your program. Okay. As far as the nursing program, it really just depends on where you go. If you go to a community college like Ames, I would say we have one of the best financial aid offices I've ever worked with, and we tend to have a lot of money for scholarships and grants and that type of thing. Our program probably sits right now at about $4,000 per year. So for the entire degree, $8,000. I would say very few of my students pay that much because they're all on scholarship or they use their FAFSA to get financial support. If you go to a baccalaureate program, it is much more expensive. It's probably about $25,000 and that kind of thing. But again, they have financial aid associated with them and that type of thing. And I will say at the community college for sure, we have so many students that are here with financial need. And in fact, we did just last week, we had a girl that in our program that needed emergency funds. And so we contacted our foundation, and they found, I shouldn't even say find because it doesn't grow on trees, but they found her $750 to help pay for, I think, her last bill for the spring semester and that kind of thing, because she just didn't have enough money to afford it. So I think, you know, if you're in a situation where you have financial need, don't discount school, because I think we can help people get through a program if that's what they want to do. So that's a great question.
Any others?
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn my space heater off now under my desk because I don't know if you can tell, but it looks like I'm sunburned all of a sudden because I'm about 200 degrees. Anyway, probably shouldn't have shared that fact with you, but anyway, thank you guys for listening today. And like I said, reach out if you have questions, if you didn't want to ask them while we were together.
All right. Well, Katrina, we thank you so much for taking us through that. I know that was pretty helpful for the students. I learned a lot myself too, so we appreciate you taking the time today to chat with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you guys have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.